Now, this year's Oscars, Palestinian director Hamdan Ballal's critically acclaimed film No Other Land won the Best Documentary Feature Award. It shines a light on the struggle of his village Susya in the occupied West Bank, where Palestinians face violence and dispossession. But no sooner after Ballal took home the coveted prize, he said an Israeli settler attacked him with the help of Israeli soldiers after filming an assault on his neighbour's house. He and two other Palestinians were later detained overnight by Israeli forces, where he alleges he was beaten and forced to sleep under a freezing air conditioner. He has since been released and is receiving medical treatment. The incidents have sparked global outrage and raised the question of the role art plays in confronting injustice. Well, Samir Mehanovic is a BAFTA award-winning film director who's long explored war, identity and resistance. His latest documentary, My Hijab, My Choice, examines Muslim women's experiences of Islamophobia. His 2015 film, The Fog of Srebrenica, brought to light the horrors of genocide in Bosnia. He joins us now from Edinburgh in the UK. Samir, thanks very much for being with us. Now, we'll talk about Hamdan Ballal in just a moment, but I want to ask you, first of all, about your latest film, My Hijab, My Choice. What inspired you to produce this film, especially given how long these debates around the hijab have been taking place in the Western world?
Well, I arrived to Scotland in August 1995 to perform at the Edinburgh Festival. And since then, more or less, I'm based here, coming back to Bosnia. And I've seen horror of war. At the moment, in the last few years, I think what's happening in the Western world is that certain politicians and media are forcing Islamophobia as ways to entertain the audience and unapologetically are offending quite large population in Britain and Western world of Muslims. And I'm afraid that that moment when you have fear of everything collapsing in society and people being victims again for reason of the faith and for reason what they practice, inspire me to spend last few years recording stories that finally have been brought to British audience and Al Jazeera World. So most victims are women because they're visibly Muslims. They wear hijab. And piece of cloth should not be in civic democratic society. Religion should be tolerated, and I think they're good citizens. And film shows that they're doing some remarkable things. And this kind of tolerance towards hate crime, tolerance towards genocide in Gaza at the moment, tolerance for discrimination against the Muslims around the world, it has to be dealt from the world that presents itself as democracy. And I appreciate living in UK for so long, but I'm very aware that if this way, that can turn into something else, like in.
And what led you to choose these 5 women in particular to be in this film?
Well, each of these women represents utter determination to make society a better world. And I'll start in no particular order. Zamzam Ibrahim, she's eco-activist whose background is from Somalia, and she became National Union student leader who was attacked by British media because she cannot be representative of other students. Tasnim Nazir, she became the first hijabi TV presenter in Scotland here, and she was also bullied in job interviews by BBC, etc. And then Amna Abdul Latif, she became the first woman in hijab to represent Manchester Council. She also started the Free Hijabi anti-racist campaign when they bullied black English players after Euro Cup. And Amna Abdul Latif, she became well known for saving Jewish men on anti-Semitic attack on London Tube, and she stood up as a Muslim to defend. And finally, last but not least, Adama Jildeh-Munu, she's very well presented, a TRT journalist and campaigner and activist against racism, who has very eloquently explaining the issues. Her background's Sierra Leone, and she's been living several generations now, lived in London, and contributed hugely to British society as a taxpayers, as a good members of society. And in the end of the day, they have to defend their existence and explain themselves after every single news article in the newspapers that portrays all Muslims as legitimate terrorists.
And you've addressed some painful topics in your films, including, as we mentioned earlier, the horrors of the genocide in Srebrenica. What parallels do you draw then between what happened there and what is currently happening in Gaza?
Well, I once you start making those kind of subjects and start researching subject of genocide, and now it still has been screened around, then you go in depth of what genocide is. And in Washington, there is there's genocide monitoring, and Professor Stanton has written 10 stages. And first stage is dehumanization, in which people are called names like they were used in Israel recently in the Gaza attack and West Bank. That they were called animals like humans, and even today in the last interview in some Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik called new infestation of Bosnian Muslims were back to East Bosnia that has been ethnically cleansed. And finally, 10th stage of genocide is denial. And this is what we are witnessing in Bosnia. And this is obviously what has been, witnessed in Gaza and now, and it will be witnessed in the future. And the other thing is that the international world didn't care much. And this is similarity. We have to put just aside how after different parameters, who is dying, and after you allow that Muslims were killed indiscriminately, that you will not have a world that's fair, and that you will create more divisions and polarization in the world.
Mm-hmm. And the recent news of Hamdan Ballal, the Palestinian filmmaker and recent Oscar winner, being attacked have come, I'm sure, as a shock to a fellow creative such as yourself. What was your reaction to that? And in particular, this is an example of a filmmaker becoming the subject himself.
I have no words, what, and I've never believed that such a sad events for last couple of years are happening, an utter onslaught on human lives in Gaza. Well, when one filmmaker spends years of making films and gets punished, for that, obviously, is the idea, and I'm sorry to say that camera is now as powerful as defense. To record, you are portrayed like me, and I congratulate him for bravery. And I was shocked, but I am sure while making this film, he was aware of the risk. He was aware of what can happen, and I'm afraid to say it's appalling. I think all film world should stop, and we should all protest by rejecting to screen any film, by rejecting to make any films that till the person is honored and released and treated like human being. Finally, when you look in distribution of this film was always problem in the West, and screening of My Hijab, My Choice was problem in the UK, where usually I'm able to screen films in cinema, etc. And I work with British media, but at the moment it's only Al Jazeera English World that's showing the film, and TRT that's carrying and doing interview. And I'm afraid unless we really start thinking heavily how to save lives, how to protect innocent people, including women, children, and the filmmakers and journalists and medical staff, then we will not have, better world. because that will ignite some response, so-called Islamic terrorism, as they call it. Even that word is wrong because it's nothing to do with Islam. But British media use mostly attributes like terrorist, jihadist, etc., without really defining what does that mean, and blaming all Islam and all Muslims. I think there is a big campaign about Islam, and I'm afraid that the filmmaker in the end is sacrificing bravery and life, like to do what's our duty as a filmmakers. And by all means, I am sending all my best wishes to the fellow filmmakers. But we can see that only by huge protest and campaign we can change this. And thank you for pointing out that.
And you, in your films, you tend to focus on the people themselves and their own stories rather than about politics and leaders directly. There's no kind of third-person narration in those films. It all comes from the people in those films. How important is that side to you, and how is it shaped by your own experience?
Well, I would say that we have unheard voices, in the world where information is freely distributed. Information is available everywhere, which is used hugely as propaganda. And actually, the narrative that now Western democracy and capitalism that's collapsing is using, like they were using 100 years ago against Jewish who suffered hugely in Second World War, and suffered genocide, large scale. Now, I think capitalism is using victims. Another to blame side is Islam and Muslim side, in which they would like to see, Muslim world disappearing, and the way they're focusing and targeting in the media subtly and sometimes not subtly, like bringing IDF officers to tell the story on BBC. That was happening here in UK. And not giving voice and pictures of Gaza, taking off documentary from screening that was from Gaza. They don't want to see this. And on the other hand, I feel that you give voice to one individual that will other women around the world perhaps associate with. And I am totally against any forcible ways in Islam that somebody should wear hijab. But if somebody is choosing for religion to be marked as a Muslim, this should be protected. And I think we are having a choice to choose, and and for me that symbol of attacks, that 80% women, 80% of all hate crime attacks on Muslims in UK, that culminated last July when they attacked the mosque. 80% are women. So once they attack women, you have to give them voice so some other women can be brave enough to walk on the street or do other things or become part of political life.
Good to talk to you, Samir Mehanovic. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thanks for watching. See you next time.